without further ado, I would like to kick off this session of Close It Distributed on the final day here, May 26th. To Close It community, welcome. It's been amazing to have all of you. We get a lot of hits on our videos, and it's just been wonderful learning community for me, and I hope for you all. I want to say special thanks to Strada today for this session. I'm going to start by introducing Dr. Holly Custard, who's Deputy Director for Institute Partnerships and Outreach at Strada, for the Strada Institute for the Future of Work, where she engages stakeholders to raise awareness and inspire action through the Institute's research and insights. And I know many of you know about Strada. Holly brings tremendous experience across nonprofit, public, and corporate sectors over the last 20 years in K-20 education. She is a University of Idaho graduate and University of Texas San Antonio graduate, and then a PhD from University of Texas, and lives in Austin. So I'm really happy to have you, Holly, and I'm going to turn this over to you. And thank you for being here for this really important discussion.
Well, thank you for inviting us and our whole Strada team to be a part of this. I have been following, and Janet and Melissa have been following all of this tremendous work that you have put. So much to feel proud of, and so great to be here with everybody. And I'll let the team, I'm going to pass it to Janet, and she can introduce herself, and then Melissa, and we'll go from there.
That'd be great. Hi, everybody. Janet Saul, Managing Director, Strada Institute for the Future of Work. We're so glad to be with you all here today. And we thought we would use our hour together to have just the richest possible conversation with our panelists and talk through what does it look like to be truly learner-centered when we try to take an approach to connecting education and work. Melissa will kick us off with background and grounding in the issues, and then we'll move quickly to the panelist discussion. We have Adam Bush from College Unbound, we have Nitsan Pellman from Climb Higher, and we have Sandy Castro from IC Stars. And Holly is the host with the most, who can really blend it all together. She knows each of these folks so well. I can't wait for the discussion. And Melissa Levitt, I can't wait for you to tell us more about the research from the Institute and to lift up the voices so we can all become more learner-centered.
Get started. Thank you so much, Janet, and thank you everyone for being here today, and we're excited to get started. So to set us up for the panel discussion, which will be the focus for today, I'm just going to take a few moments to provide some context for the main ideas that we'll be talking about. So what you're looking at now is an image of a cycle, and I'm going to use this to frame our discussion. So we're all here to talk about the need for greater equity in education to work pathways, and to talk about how learner-centered solutions can accelerate equity. So I want to start by thinking about a cycle, because we know that there's a cyclical nature to perpetuating inequity. And here's how that can work. Parents with high education levels and well-paying jobs can spend those resources setting their children up to achieve those same outcomes or even better in terms of education and work. They have social and financial capital that can open doors for their children. And that's a problem when those open doors come at the expense of those families and children who don't start off with the same connections and resources. But what would it look like to reimagine that cycle when it is driven by equity, which is what I've tried to do on this slide here. And you can see that learners are at the center there. So to do that, to create this cycle of connecting education to work that is driven by equity, we have to put learners at the center of everything we do, especially those learners who have been excluded from education and career opportunity. So a major topic in higher ed that's been making a lot of news this year is enrollment declines. So enrollment is down at colleges and universities, about 2 to 4% across the board, depending on whether you look at fall enrollment or spring enrollment. But those enrollment declines are hitting the hardest at community colleges, where it's down about 11 or 12%. So at the Strada Institute, we recently published a report on this topic. And one thing we talk about is who these declines are hitting the hardest. It's first-time students, it's older students, and it's students of color. So those declines were dramatic this year. They've been making a lot of news, and for good reason. Folks are paying attention to it. But I think that we have to look at those declines in the historical context of who already has not been as well represented in or as well served by higher ed. Colleges are not producing Black, Latino, and Native American grads at the same rate as white and Asian students. And even among grads, whites still earn more than Blacks and Latinos with the same level of educational attainment. What we would hope would be a leveler and give people sort of the same starting off point. We find that that just isn't how it plays out in terms of those long-term career outcomes. And now we know that those cracks have widened. So we have just lived through a year of a health and an economic crisis that really showed how the consequences of inequity can play out on a massive scale. Job loss from the pandemic has hit hardest for people of color and people without college degrees. So flashback about a year ago, a little over a year ago, April 2020, when we're just all starting to figure out what this pandemic will mean for our economy, unemployment levels due to the pandemic were at their worst. So we had 20% of people who just had a high school education, they were unemployed. And that's compared to about 13.9% of people with an associate's degree and about 9% of people with bachelor's degrees. So clearly these are all huge numbers, huge percentages, but we do see that as that level of educational attainment goes up, that unemployment rate goes down. So fast forward a little bit more to the end of last year, end of 2020, the unemployment situation is much better, but it's still higher among Blacks and Latinos than whites. So at that point, we had about 5.8% unemployment for whites and between 8 and 10% still for Blacks and Latinos. So what will it take to address these gaps and expand access to education and good jobs and put equity at the center of that? We need to put learners and we need to focus on learners. At the Strada Institute, we have done about 100 hours of interviews with adult learners. Those were led by my co-presenter and colleague, our hostess with the mostest, Holly Custard. And the conversations that she had illuminated the experiences, but also the barriers that adult learners face when they're trying to make progress in their education and careers. So we want to make sure that you hear what we heard. So I'm going to play a short video now that's featuring some excerpts from just some of these videos so you can get a sense of what these folks talked to us about.
I feel like I could learn to do most jobs, but I understand the reality of the job market is you have to come in saying, I already know how to do this. No one's going to give you 6 months to figure out how to do a job.
I was laid off, and for the first time, the relevance of not having a degree became manifest, because even though I had years upon years, over 20 years of experience doing all these different things, the first question they were asking is, so where'd you go to school? The last time I actually had to go looking for a job, we did things like talk to people face to face, and that's completely gone now. And you just end up getting put into a slot, and as a result, they don't know who you are. They just look at, has he gone to school? No, so then you go into that pile.
Money. Because you don't learn how to finance when you're poor, So you don't learn how to look, you almost ignore your finances. And I had to learn to look at them to be able to manage them. But that's a huge, overwhelming gap.
But I knew that in order to make a livable wage, at the time I think they were paying me like a little over minimum wage, which you can't live on if you wanted to. I needed to put something in front of my name or behind my name to, one, separate myself from being a criminal, and also to make me legitimate in some ways.
I mean, when I went to orientation, it was crazy. It was overwhelming. I saw all these young people like sitting next to me, and I was like, I do not belong here. Like, what am I doing? These are kids that are coming out of high school, and I can be their mother. That's what I'm going to be in the classroom, and I really don't want to be that. Plus, I have experience, I have experience. I don't have a paper that can show that I have knowledge.
It felt like punishment, just to try to get ahead. I have this go get it spirit, but I was never in a position or given that supportive hope to keep going forward. You know what I mean? And I knew that's where I wanted to go, was forward.
You know, the Greek word to incite means to put a flame underneath. And I want to incite some learning as well as some dreaming.
So we heard a lot about those barriers in transitioning between learning and work. People don't know where to start looking for a job. They don't have the best information about which learning programs are going to connect them with which career opportunities. And that's largely because that information just isn't there and it isn't accessible. It isn't clear. Adults have a lot going on. We all do, with childcare, work, other responsibilities. And it's really tough to fit in education, especially if you're that person sitting at orientation, looking around and thinking, these people are supposed to be my peers and they don't feel like my peers. I feel like I have so much other experience and knowledge to bring to this. So maybe institutions and learning providers need to work to create a different sense of belonging. Maybe there needs to be different kinds of funding options and support to make it all work. So as you can see in the video, those interviews took place before the pandemic. So we know that these challenges have been disrupting education and career plans for long before the pandemic, but the pandemic has worsened them. I think we hear a lot these days about how the pandemic brought us unprecedented times. It's a cliche. I feel like at this point it's sort of becoming a national joke, but I actually think it's worse and more dangerous than a joke because it isn't even true, because a lot of these challenges do have a precedent. And I think we kind of ignore the fact that the roots of this were already there at our peril. The pandemic did take those challenges, it made them worse, it added in some new ones. So people who were out of work didn't have the time or the resources, financial, emotional, mental resources to pay for a degree. Those with kids were probably too busy homeschooling to put time into their own education. And with education moving online, we know that that makes it more convenient for many, and that can be a great tool of access, but not if you're someone without great reliable internet or without the most up-to-date devices, or just someone without a lot of free time and free space in the home to concentrate on learning. So the causes of these challenges have been with us for a long time. That's how we know that they're not going to just go away when we emerge from the pandemic. But as we begin that recovery, as we start to emerge and start to see that light at the end of the tunnel, I pray we're close, we can take a look at what the pandemic has taught us about supporting learners in incredibly difficult circumstances. So we have some opportunities and we have some new insights now. We have different ways of learning. We've gotten creative in using online and hybrid formats. We can do that to provide education, support, career training, career guidance, and we can keep building on that. We have new insights, I think, into the importance of helping workers and learners transition into different roles in different industries, because we've seen what it's like when entire industries shut down overnight. So we can think now about how to help adults take what they know and apply that in a new opportunity. And we are experiencing a reckoning as a nation about the impact of racial injustice. Yesterday marked the 1-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, and his death has catalyzed a movement, and it's demanding that we work together and take collective action to root out that bias and that inequity that's embedded everywhere in our society, but including or sometimes even especially in our systems of education and work. So we have the opportunity, we have the insights, we have the urgency to accelerate equity, and now I'm going to show you that we have a framework too. So what you're looking at now is a framework that we've developed at Strata. It was designed with learners at the center to get rid of those barriers that they're experiencing. And it encompasses the kinds of solutions to accelerate equity by helping people connect the dots between learning and work, because we know there can be so many dots and it's not always clear how they fit together. So this framework is made up of 5 key elements. Navigation helps us understand our options and make informed decisions. Wraparound supports assist with essential needs and also with overcoming some doubts and mental hurdles, things like that sense of belonging that are so important. Targeted education programs are tailored to working learners, teaching skills with a clear connection to employment. Integrated earning and learning is all about those precious resources of time and money to support learning and to have folks do learning and work together, work-based learning, so they can make the most out of their limited time. Transparent hiring is what brings it all together to make sure that learners are valued for the skills and the experience that they bring to the job. So our panelists today are really bringing this framework to life with the innovative solutions and connections they're developing. And I think they're actually doing more than bringing it to life, because it's their work and the learners who they work with that have actually inspired this framework. So I know we're looking forward to hearing from them. I'm going to hand the mic now to Holly to start our discussion.
Great. Thanks, Melissa and Janet, for the intro. And this is just like such a great day to be here with all of you and with this amazing panel. I have been looking forward to this, and I just want to thank you so much for sharing your time. And I wish we could see everybody's faces, that we were in a big room together and learning together, but hopefully next year. So the first question when you look at these beautiful faces on the screen is, what do these 3 amazing leaders have in common. So I'm going to tell you that they are all driven to create equitable access to education and meaningful employment and economic growth. They are all delivering learner-centered educational programs that facilitate personal and professional growth and leadership skills, and that these things are illuminating a clear path to a good job and a thriving life. And they're all three tireless advocates, mentors, and educators who have dedicated their lives to realizing the change in this world that we all want to see. So thank you for being here. Thank you for all of the work that you do. And I'm so excited for people to get to know your work that don't. So I'm going to do an introduction, and I'll do my best to highlight the things that I just see as so beautiful in your work. And then please, when we have a chance to talk, if I've missed anything or if there's something you'd like to add about your work or your feelings toward this work, we'll have an opportunity to do that. But I'm going to start by introducing Sandy Castrol, who's the president and co-founder of IC Stars, which is a workforce development organization and a social enterprise. I love that you frame it that way. And they recruit talent, they prepare talent for technology careers and community leadership, and they link talent directly to employment with employers and good jobs. And Sandy and her staff are masterful. I mean, I've seen it in action at creating community and a sense of belonging and trust. And it is these things that is driving learners' personal transformation, their intellectual growth, and their professional confidence. And economic mobility is coming a result of all of this. And it really leverages the graduates of the program to become leaders in growing the health of their communities. It's absolutely beautiful work. Thank you for being here, Sandy. Nitsan Pellman, CEO of Climb Higher, thank you so much for joining us. And Nitsan and her entire crew are dedicated to breaking the cycle of poverty through education and workforce development. And Climb Higher specifically prepares talent for new collar jobs like Salesforce administration or Google project management, in-demand jobs that you can be prepared to jump into with the right skills and the right social capital. And through this community-driven education program, they provide skills training in these areas, but they find ways to build in and leverage social capital as part of the curriculum, which is what makes this very beautiful and unique. And all of this supports graduates in securing employment and realizing double, sometimes triple their incomes as a result. And their co-op model really leverages the strength and the social capital of their alumni. And this helps to further power the program and support the community's ongoing success, which is just incredible. And you can read about the climbers when you connect with Nitsan on LinkedIn. Okay, last but not least is Adam Bush, provost of College Unbound. And we have Adam to thank and his boss, Dennis Lickey, president of College Unbound, and all of their staff and students, an amazing institution that helped a lot of the interviews and the stories that you saw earlier. Adam, I couldn't help but watch your face as we watched the stories because you know them all so well. So thank you again for that. I wanted to introduce College Unbound from how they've characterized the program and what they're committed to. I just think it's beautiful. So if you'll allow me, College Unbound is committed to deeply personalized education that fosters intellectual curiosity and improves the life of students and the lives of those they touch. I think that's incredible. They are committed to pedagogy that honors the individual and demonstration of competencies over seat time. And they're committed to providing leadership in innovative practices that disrupt conventional higher education. So fascinating. And College Unbound, for those who don't know, is an accredited nonprofit bachelor's completion program that really focuses on integrating project-based learning, which is aligned to student interest and the needs of their communities. Their dedicated faculty and staff, deep wraparound supports, flexible scheduling, and a strong community of learners has helped them realize over 83% graduation rate, which is phenomenal. So thank you so much to all three of you, and look forward to kind of letting you all contextualize your own your own experience in your own work. But that's what I love about it. So let's get started. We'll have a good conversation here. It's going to be a free-flowing discussion. I don't want it to feel formal and stilted. So if somebody answers a question and somebody else has something to contribute, please, jump in and we can just have a good conversation between the three of you, because you're all so different, but you're all so dedicated to the same objective. And I think there's so much to learn with the richness of this discussion. So Let's start. So it's clear that all three of you and your organizations see the importance of having a dual role in education and connecting that to the workforce. So just want to start with kind of a high level reflection on why this is central to your mission. So let's start with Sandy and share your thoughts.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Holly. What an amazing, beautiful introduction. It's really just an honor to be here with these rock stars in this work. So I'm humbled and honored to be here. And I'll start by saying, before founding IC Stars, I was an educator and worked with different school corporations and adult basic education, and really had a pretty long view of what this work was and how work and education really sing together. And the one thing that I think separates really great education from everybody else is, well, two things. One is what we learn, and two is who we learn with. And by what we learn, I mean, post-industrial revolution, it's time for a new way, right? Like, we're all being taught to work on an assembly line and kind of do what we're told and answer the questions at the back of the chapter. But really great schools take that to a whole nother level. It's not about answering the questions. It's actually about creating the question itself and learning how to innovate and how to be a maker and how to create things, but most importantly, how to lead. And then who we learn with is really, like you mentioned, about our social capital. So if we go to school with kids whose folks are CEOs and senators, and we just have a whole different window of opportunities. If all of the kids' parents that we go to school with work in the factory or do the same kind of thing, we can only be what we see. And so our social capital is more than just introductions. It's about inspiration and believing what's possible. And so as educators who are making those roadways from learning to doing and making and building, I think that building things that are centered around the learner to really develop leaders bigger than a job, like what's the impact that you want to make in the world? And then let's put the career piece under that. But let's learn how to think and redesign and create the systems and structures that will make that change. And there's no reason why we can't empower our folks from the community to be able to do that.
Thank you, Sandy. I think, and my internet might be freezing, so I apologize in advance if I get this weird face and it stays there for a little while. So Sandy, I wanted to ask you, because that's so beautiful. And you didn't say mindset explicitly, but you were talking about kind of the, having a mental, I see it as a mental transformation, right? Through this discovery you're talking about. And you mentioned the community. Can you describe what that looks like in your program? Like how do you do that? Because it's magical.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I think that we think about IC Stars as a hub, and not just because we're in technology and we're geeking out on the metaphor, but really literally a hub that brings together community and industry. And that the secret is that we really believe that the beneficiaries of our work, of our training, are not our students, but the industry, because they're the ones who are getting all this great talent. And so we believe that they should pay for it. So, every cohort has a Fortune 500 company that sponsors a project. They give us a business problem. Our cohort is divided up into teams. They form their own consulting companies, and then they're competing with each other for this RFP. So immediately we kind of shift it from I'm the learner, you are the teacher, to now our students are the consultants who are going to solve this business problem. And what's interesting is on the industry side, these project sponsors sell like hotcakes. We're sold 1.5 to 2 years in advance, because it's good for their business. It's like they have this, 3-month window into talent, but it increases employee retention Because imagine, like, you're a DBA, you're, a full stack developer, and suddenly you're exposed to like bright, incredibly talented, resilient people who are so hungry and ready to contribute that it reminds you again of why you got into this industry. It's also a tool for managers to get their high potential folks doing more management and kind of being that front facing to the next generation. And so we're always thinking about the value proposition across the whole line, so it's not just about the value that we're bringing our students, but the value that we're bringing the industry, and then the value that our students with industry are bringing back to the community. So that workforce isn't this linear thing where like you get a skill and then you go away, you never come back, and 30 years later you write a check and go to the gala. It's really about this isn't something I go through, it's something that I join. And that part of that means that my work here isn't done until I teach someone else, until I make an opportunity for someone else. And that's what shifts us from thinking in the mindset of charity to really seeing myself as a contributor and a leader. And I think that's a huge differentiator in how we perceive ourselves and that agency that we develop.
Adam, how does that resonate with you? And what's similar and different in how you think about that through your program?
Yeah, what I loved hearing from Sandy is how Sandy so purposely blurs the distinction of student, learner, teacher, mentor, workplace. Like, we're all learning in daily life and practice all the time. And really it's higher ed that has drawn the lines of learning only counts for credit when it's in a class that you paid for, and when it's on, then that's when we'll put on a transcript, and that's when it can have value. But how do we think about higher ed, but also beyond higher ed, valuing the learning that's happening in daily practice? How do we honor that and recognize that and help people have the chance to reflect on that, to be able to advance in jobs if that's where they're trying to go, in their workplace, to be full participants in their lives, and to have that opportunity. So, I mean, with College Unbound, really think about how can higher ed be the excuse to do the work we kind of always wanted to do and have always put on the back burner. And then taking on the identity of a student allows us to interact with our boss differently, to tackle a project at work differently, to gather with colleagues in another way. When we talk about College Unbound as the newest accredited college in the country, yeah, and we have one major, organizational leadership and change, and we try and fit everyone within that space, and then within that they're tackling individual projects that they drive, and that drives their whole curriculum. But we became a college and moved through accreditation to then become more than a college, or at least different than a college. To really think about ourselves as a community-based organization and a radical higher ed infrastructure to advocate for and accredit community-based learning, so that the degree is the means, and even more than that, the excuse to gather differently, to scheme and to imagine a better world. And so that's where it's like, with everything Sandy was saying, I was like, yeah, bro, I'm in, let's do it. And when I say the word radical, like radical higher ed infrastructure, I really go to the etymology of radical. It's about the forming at the root. It's about the root cause of things. And we have to get at the root and undo it and replant and think about how to do work differently. And so higher ed is the way to imagine the workplace differently. It's a way, an excuse for us to gather differently and to honor the learning that we're doing in daily practice.
That's amazing. And all three of you and your organizations are really focused on community. That is such an important piece, because it's about the inspiration, as you said, Adam, like these, for people to be able to do what they've always wanted to do, or make an impact on their community that they really care about, that they can see directly how they're learning and how it applies to having agency in the world, and I guess being with other people who you can relate to and who've got your back and who have similar challenges, like all of that is important. In addition to the technical things like flexible schedules or having dinner in the evenings, or, like, we don't have to do it the way we've always done it. Yeah. It works.
That's right. It's like higher ed was set up with the artificial barriers of you have to go to class, and that's where your learning happens. So when I think about College Unbound, we do blend. You're both doing online learning, you're doing prior learning documentation assessment. We're really asking folks also to gather in small groups weekly, but that they have agency about where those groups are and what they look like. So that's in public libraries, that's in high schools after work, that maybe their kids go to those schools, that's in the conference room of the United Way, it's in where the shift change happens, it's in adult learning centers, it's in City Hall. So we want to make sure that we're honoring the places and the community space that people are already engaging and seeing those as sites of learning. And then the work that people are doing collaboratively in those spaces then help build the capacity of that workplace, so that the United Way, when they host a cohort, are able to do different work because the cohort's embedded in that practice. That's what I loved where Sandy was talking about, like them tackling the work and there's a waiting list for it, because of course it's helping the workplace reimagine, think about what they're able to do differently.
That's awesome. Nissan, so talk about changing the workplace. You are going after the most interesting approach, and I am excited for people to learn more about this from you. You know, when we first talked, you were telling me about this model. Again, community is central to this, like of connecting the dots between what employers need, what skills they're looking for, and connecting people who they'd be filtered out of consideration. Number one, if you're not there kind of building the bridge. So I want to understand more about like making that bridge with employers and linking the connective tissue between, you know, community and then skills, specific skills for a specific job with specific employers. Like, how does this work? Like, you know, how do you use community and how do you infuse social capital as part of this? And then how does that link to the employer? Can you just explain a little bit that connective tissue? Because I think it's so beautiful.
Thank you. Thanks, Holly. What's really fun for me about being here on this panel is I got to talk to Holly a lot about this before it began. And now we're 2 years in. And so now I get to sort of share what it looks like when it's not just an idea. So I remember actually sitting at LinkedIn. So 3 years ago, I was an entrepreneur in residence at LinkedIn, and I got to spend a year sort of on the inside there. And I remember actually sitting and talking to Holly in the phone booth of like one of those LinkedIn phone booths and sort of talking to her about this. So 3 years ago, LinkedIn put a referral button on their platform. And what they learned by doing that was that 9 out of 10 job seekers were getting jobs through referrals. And I just like had never thought about how important referrals were before this referral button showed up. And I started to think for myself, like, how many jobs have I gotten through referrals? And very quickly I realized all of them. And then I started to think about everyone else I knew. And it turned out that everybody else had gotten the vast majority of their jobs through referrals. And we all now are on this panel because Holly asked us to. Like, you know, so much of the world goes round through referrals. And then I started to think, okay, so where do people build their networks that ultimately become this large, you know, platform for, you know, referrals and opportunities? Well, college is like a pretty essential time. And what happens in college, like to build those opportunities? Well, we sing in a cappella clubs and we write for the newspaper and we join a frat or a sorority and we play lacrosse and we play poker in the dorms until 4 a.m. And we do all these great things that are, you know, sort of the fun parts of college. And quite honestly, that's where community is built, and that's where relationships go deep and people build those meaningful connections. And then, you know, years later, those relationships are still opening up doors. I remember in my 20s, I had a boyfriend who went to, you know, not a fancy school, and he had a fancy job. He was working as a Bloomberg journalist, and he would say to me, I go to these cocktail parties and everybody that's my peer as a journalist is, you know, showing up at these events, and everybody that they're reporting on, the banks and whatever, they've all gone to college together and they've all played lacrosse together and and I don't have any of these connections to them. And he was asking me, like, now this is like 15 years ago, like, like, what do I do? How do I break in? Like, I don't have a way to talk to these people. And this guy was a white middle class dude, right? So when you just start to think about, like, what does it look like to break into a world that you might not have been a part of? It's hard. And so I started to have this hypothesis that as the cost of college becomes increasingly more and more prohibitive, especially for people of color from low income backgrounds, I have this hypothesis that there's all this amazing talent out there that either didn't get to finish college because they had to drop out because it was too expensive, or they did get to go to college, but they had to work 1 or 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And then they don't get to do all those fun things because they're working all the time. And so they go to class, they come back, and then they don't build any of these relationships. And no one really gave them the inside scoop that mostly college is for the relationships and not as much for all the specific learning that you might do there and you might remember and you might not. So now look, you can't network your way out of poverty. Like, it doesn't, you have to have some combination of skills and relationships and networks. But it seemed to me that there was a lot of workforce organizations out there, like gazillions of them, who just are on this mantra of like skills. Go to Coursera, take a skill, like, and then you're going to be great. Go to Udemy, go to Google, grow with Google, go to AWS. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry has a platform now and has a skill that they can impart to you. And a lot of those skills are really designed for a very certain kind of learner, a very like analytical learner that can watch a video, read an article, and voila, they know how to do it all of a sudden. Well, guess what? The vast majority of people don't learn that way. And let's just say you've been unpacking produce at Trader Joe's for the last 5 years. And now you go onto one of these platforms and you learn that skill magically, even though it wasn't really designed for you that effectively. And now you start applying cold to jobs and so you have, not a college degree, you have no relevant experience, and you don't have, you have a job that doesn't seem particularly relevant, a blue collar job. Who the heck is going to look at your resume? And so like all of that has sort of led me in the direction of, if you don't embed community, social capital, relationships into a workforce organization, it's really not going to be that effective, skills alone. So that was sort of like the premise here. And so the way that we've designed this model is that the alumni of Climb Higher, once they go through a 5-month rigorous training, it all happens at night or on the weekend so that we can serve people that are working in gig economy roles. Then they can, then they start to break in, and I'll tell a little bit more about what that breaking in looks like. They start getting those middle-class jobs, and then they come back and they pay it forward as part of the community to help teach the next set of climbers the same skills that they just learned. Because who better than to teach that skill? The person who was packing boxes at the Amazon warehouse now is working at IBM, getting double or triple that income, and now says to the next climber, like, I was a cook at a Silicon Valley company in the kitchen. I barely knew English 5 years ago. Today, I'm now working at IBM, and my job is to teach you how to get there too. And I was in your shoes 6 months ago. And so that's like and then what happens is when Miguel, who now works at IBM, says, like, so now once you're on the inside, employers are always asking for referrals. How many of us have had, an employer that we work for say, I now have this job opening. You got anybody that we can hire for this? Everyone always asks those questions once you're on the inside. So who does Miguel say he's gonna refer? Oh, the person that he's supporting, the new pod of climbers that he's working with. And we teach that ethos and we teach that mentality that it's not just about skills, it's about a community. So we have a sweatshirt and it literally says, we are a community, not a class. And your job is to pull the next one in with you. And so they start to think about that really actively on the first day of program in those 5 months. And the other thing, and I'll just say about sort of like how this model works, is that, this is so much about what Adam and Sandy just talked about this need for community. I mean, if you think about the frontline workers of our society, they are not the people that are treated the best, right? They're the victims of a lot of racism. They're the victims of people who like experience a lot of hostility in the workplace, right? Like not everyone is so nice to your Target frontline employees, right? Or your baristas or your Lyft drivers. I hope that all of you are nice to those people, but not everyone is so nice to them. And then on top of that, I've now seen it a lot. Climbers come to us and they tell us, like, people in their lives told them that they weren't capable. They told them they weren't smart. They told them that they weren't going to be anything. They have a lot of trauma, a lot of PTSD, a lot of pain, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of hurt. And they come to a community full of people who have similar experiences. We call that similarity homophily. And we get them to start talking about those experiences with each other. And then we say, you all look like each other, you all come from similar places, and you want to go to similar places. And you're going to learn this thing together, and you're going to be each other's support system. You're going to be each other's accountability partners. And at 3 a.m, when somebody's struggling, like, somebody else is going to have your back, and they're not going to let you quit. They're not going to let you stop, and they're going to be role models to each other. And then they're going to, like, lift each other. And I now hear so many of them talk about how they found friendship in COVID, when nobody's building new friendships. They're finding each other and they're supporting each other. 80% of our alumni have now gotten middle-class jobs. They've gone from $24,000 income before the program to $66,000 on average. And every time we graduate another cohort, we're seeing those jobs happen faster and faster. So it used to be within 6 months of graduation. Now, this last cohort, 50% of them were hired even before they finished the program. Because what happens with social capital is that when a climber goes to Nike and they're killing it, then Nike calls for the next climber, because they open doors for each other. And we build that ethos and the mentality into the first day of the program. We say, we all rise together. When you guys are successful, you open the door for the next person, both personally and through the organization. We have over 40 employers who have hired climbers, and every day we get another employer coming to us and saying, we've heard about climbers, we want them too, because one begets the next and begets the next. And so that's sort of the vision of our community.
That is incredible. Congratulations. Yes, so different from the LinkedIn phone booth discussion. It's like a big dream. This is awesome. Congratulations to all. I mean, everyone, every one of you. Like, you're empowering so much change, which drives me. You know, you touched on equity. You know, like, this is building equity on so many levels. You know, that making this connection between how we learn and why we learn to where and how we work. There's equity fused in this work. So how, Sandy, I'd love to hear your perspective on how is this creating greater equity in our communities, in our country? What's the role of education and work in the way you are approaching it? How do you see this as a equity?
Well, I think even the word equity is so ironic and interesting. You know, on one hand, equity, as we are talking about it, is like, how do we make opportunities for others, for our underserved and our underrepresented folks, to just have the same opportunities as everyone else, right? On the other hand, equity in a financial perspective is about the hope of a future return. And I think what's so potent about what Adam and Nitsan just talked about in their amazing organizations is about the hope of a future return. So, like, even the idea that success is defined by our job or our income or whatever is only half of the picture. It's about what we do with it and how we acknowledge and build community. So if leadership is about making opportunities for others, like really just that simple, what are the opportunities that our students, our learners are making for others? And that's part of the process. Like, what are you going to do with it? It's the hope of a future return, that I will come back to the community, that I will help to build that community, that I will make opportunities for others. And so, just like what we're hearing, it's embedded in the programming and in what we're doing to really develop leaders, something bigger than a job. And so we look at it as, okay, if leadership is making opportunities for others in the project, how are you making opportunities for your client? in addition to the software that you're building, how are you making opportunities for them to shine in front of the CIO? How are you making opportunities for them to see each other? And I think so often in workforce, we talk about transformation, like the inputs, the outputs, the outcomes, and it's transformative because people are now earning more money than their parents combined. Our folks too are seeing like a 300% increase in pay. And that's life-changing, absolutely. But so now what? What do you do with it? How are we making opportunities for our colleagues, right? You don't really know something until you teach someone else. And I love that idea of, okay, they're the most coveted person to teach, somebody who's just learned something because there's that close to it. And they've got an amazing story to tell that says, you can too, I've been there. And then how are we making opportunities for the communities that we come from? So when we started this work, over 20 years ago, we thought about leadership as people getting great jobs and being a role model or example for everybody else. And I was like, yeah, maybe, but that's such a little tip of it, right? So if we determine success by getting out of the hood, what's left in the hood? What if we determine success by investing back in the hood, the hope of a future return? And what does that look like? Well, it looks like we have service leaders, folks who are mentoring, teaching, being visible, buying homes in the community. So that's one of our metrics is we measure how many homeowners in our alumni association. So people are receiving public assistance and now they're buying homes, and they're buying homes in the communities that they came from. And that, so to date, we've got over 70 homeowners in our alumni group. And that's powerful stuff because it's not just how much money, it's really about what are you doing with it and how are you then impacting the community? Or business leaders, how many entrepreneurs have been started companies and now they're hiring from the community. Over 57 businesses have been started in our alumni group. And then civic leaders. So these are folks who are looking at a systems level to impact the policies that impact our communities. And rather than those policies that are made for us, the policies can be made by us or with us. And thinking about developing civic, business, and service leaders with a shared set of experiences, right, that bond them, like all the things, that you talk about, like the clubs and things that happen outside of our classrooms. That's where we fortify ourselves and build our resiliency and our camaraderie in our community. And if we can build 1,000 leaders across business, civic, and service in any geographic region, we can perhaps reverse that vicious cycle of poverty that limits opportunities and turn it into a virtuous one that creates opportunities.
I love that.
So that is embedded in our
rich, Sandy. My God, that's like the big level, real life richness, right? That's amazing. I love that answer. Thank you so much. That was so amazing. And it made me think about, you were talking about this, we're going to run out of time. So I hate that. I wish we could talk all day. So much fun. Okay. But the last question that I'm going to get in is going to be, Adam, I'd love to hear, since the pandemic, this has made all three of you, I know, like, how are we going to do this? Like suddenly we have to be remote or we have to work differently or things have changed. But curious, how, when you think about reaching more people or growing your program so that we can get this more and more like equitable change, as you described it, Sandy, like, how do we do that? And have you learned anything has something happened during this pandemic that has given you an aha moment of, this has not been great, but we've learned that maybe we can do XYZ. Adam, can you explain maybe how
Sure.
your thinking has changed?
I'll ramble a little bit and we'll see if it answers it and then others can join in. College Unbound in a lot of ways was started as a degree completion college. And with that was built on the trauma of folks' past experiences in higher ed, being made to feel like they don't belong. higher ed wasn't designed for the student body College Unbound, nor either the other organizations represented here wish to support. Racial hierarchies and patriarchy are embedded within and exacerbated by higher ed. And so we really think about whose knowledge gets to be named, and with that, also whose knowledge gets erased. And that drives the whole curriculum of the college. So when the pandemic happened, nothing was easy, but also it was a natural evolution of the school. We were already embedded in people's lives with a curriculum driven by each student about the questions that they were facing on a daily basis. And so those questions became ones certainly about survival in a different way. Am I safe? Is my family? What does learning look like at home? Can I, how do I think about the services I need to support myself and the folks around me who I care about? What does it mean to think about community action and communal struggles for justice? Those then became the things that drive the curriculum. For some of our students, those were always the things that drove our curriculum. We were always committed as a college to having hot meals and childcare provided whenever folks would gather in their small groups. When we stopped gathering in small groups, in any group, we had to rethink what did it mean to provide those services. We did them very purposely. It wasn't these like on the side student services. It was, these are the things that are a part of our pedagogy, part of how we learn together, that you break bread with someone and you're part of their lives in a different way. And so we were doing meal delivery work a lot. We were doing childcare in different ways. For some folks, it was paying for Disney Plus subscription. For others, it was doing outdoor walks in the park and doing activities there. We talk about the Big 10 being embedded in our curriculum, the resiliency, advocacy, collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, and 4 or 5 more. We're now thinking about how do we design curriculum for younger folks, for young people to be doing alongside their parents as they're navigating their college degree. And so we're thinking about childcare that's in collaboration with the curriculum in a different way. And then we had a whole infrastructure built around what we call learning in public, valuing the learning that people are doing outside the classroom, either before the college or while they're in it, putting their projects into action. That assessment of learning was also about how folks are navigating the pandemic. And so we did a lot of outreach work too for folks who are frontline workers and critical care providers, ensuring that people knew that what they were doing was learning that was being valued by an institution. And so we advocated and sought out critical care workers to make sure that we had pathways for folks, even if they weren't going to College Unbound, that they could have learning credited so that their return to higher ed, if they wanted a bachelor's degree, was not this like abrupt start and stop, but built into the work and the learning that they were doing. So in a lot of ways, we were designed for moments like that. I guess one more thing I'll just say, and it ties into like, Sandy and I have been going back and forth on etymology, I think, in this thing, and like beautifully. And I think too about the etymology of grief and grievance and what it means to hold one another to account. That's really what a grievance is. And so what does it mean to collectively hold one another to account and to demand justice? And that's about personal work, but that's certainly about collective work and how so school and an infrastructure can do that and help one another demand more.
Wow. Well, I mean, this is incredible. And to me, this is the heart of innovation, is the way you all are thinking about what the needs are, how we approach solving for these challenges, and bringing value and benefit to everyone. Everyone wins from this. And you're not afraid to try new things in new ways and to think about things and apply things in new ways with different types of people and with the communities that we're serving, that we're all working with and for. So this has been incredible. I am so grateful that you agreed to come today. And I'm so happy that all of the participants here and watching the recording got a chance to get to know you and your programs, because this is the hope that our country needs. And this is the hope that our people, our citizens need to make progress going forward. So just thank you so much for everything that you do.
And I second that. This was amazing and inspiring, and just wish we could just keep talking and listening and sharing. We do have just time for maybe one question. I mean, there's been a lot of people chatting, talking about how inspiring it is. Does anybody want to ask one question?
Sorry, I hogged it.
No, I think each of your missions and messages is outstanding. I was thrilled to able to hear and learn about your organization. So that's great. We will be sharing all of this information. And I also learned more about your organization. So thank you so much. Holly.
Can I jump in and end the panel with one quick story, since I know Holly loves stories. So I want to tell you about a climber from our first cohort. His name is Iral. When I met him, he had actually graduated from college with a computer science degree. And he went to SF State, and he applied for like 100 jobs when he finished college, and not one employer even bothered to reject him. He had no network, he had no relationships, and he couldn't break in. And his mom was a house cleaner. They're from the Philippines, barely speaks a word of English, and he needed to help his family with income. So he took a retail job at Burlington Coat Factory, and he made $20,000 a year for the next 6 years, working less than 25 hours a week, because employers in the retail industry won't let you work for more than 25 hours a week, because then they have to pay you health insurance or overtime. So he did that for 6 years. I found him, and he was in our inaugural cohort at Climb Higher. He is so bright and so capable and such a badass in his own right. And he was the first climber to get a job coming out of the program. And he started working at a company called Arcus, which is a company that helps nonprofits customize their sales force. And he got a really nice job offer for $73,000. And he called me when he got the job offer, and he said, the job offer came in at 70,000. And I said to him, Iral, you need to ask for 73. And he said, no, Nitsan, they're going to say that I'm a money pig, and they're going to say that I'm a grubber, and they're going to take away my offer. And I said, no, they won't. They expect you to negotiate, and I'm going to model for you how you can have that conversation in a really humble way. And he said, I'm really scared, Nitsan, and I'm really anxious, and I really don't want to do this. And I said, please try, Iral. I promise you, you have one shot, and this is the day to do it. So he did. And of course, they didn't bat an eye, and they gave him $73,000. Okay, 1.5 years later, he calls me and he says, Nitsan, I would really like you to be a reference for me for a new job that I just applied for at a company called Twilio. Twilio is one of the hottest Bay Area companies in Silicon Valley. It's fast growing. It's really like at the top of the food chain. And I said, Iral, that's amazing. And ironically, Twilio just reached out to us on Friday and asked if we could send them a couple of climbers for a couple of roles that they're hiring for. And to be honest, they're looking for people with a little bit of experience. And I think that you having 1.5 years under your belt will actually be a better fit than a fresh climber that has no experience coming out of the cohort. And he said, and I said, so should I make an intro? And he said, no, don't make an intro. I already have a job offer from them. But I just needed a reference because it's a verbal offer, and they're going to make it official next week. And I said, oh my God, that's amazing, Iral. How did that happen? He said, oh, I used my network at Climb Higher, and I got an introduction from somebody else, and now I have the offer. And I said, that's amazing. How much do they offer you? And he said, they offered me 80. And I asked them for 85, and they didn't bat an eye, and they gave it to me. That is impact. I didn't have to coach him twice. I just got to coach him once, and then he's running on his own. So I leave you with all of that. Thank you so much.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you. Holly, Melissa, Janet, thank you for putting your time in for this session. We so appreciate it. And I'm going to stop recording and then start again because my friend Sean Sullivan is here. I'm just going to put up this last thank you to you all. Hold on, let me get this out of the way. hold on. Well, who knows?
This is the same thing that happens to me.
Thank you. Here's
Thank
your
you for having
us.
us.
Okay, thanks so much. And we are moving on to our next session.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, bye, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
I'm going to stop the recording really quickly, or maybe Tiffany. Hi, Sean. Just a sec. Okay, hold on, everybody. We're just getting back together. Tiffany's trying to take over at the helm, so not sure. I do want to make sure we're recording this, so. Okay.